After 3 long years of fun and, occasionally, fury, a grand adventure has finally reached its conclusion, so let's talk about it. Hey Diana, it's Charles. How are you today? We are at a major turning point in Pokémon history with the announcement that Ash Ketchum will retire from his role as the anime's protagonist after the 11-episode Pokémon Aim to be a Master Pokémon Masters Capstone series, kicking off in the new year, with the torch to be passed on to 2 brand new heroes in a brand new anime beginning in April 2023. It is pretty crazy stuff, but one fact that has been overshadowed by all the bombshell news drops is that the 3-year running anime series Pocket Monsters, or Pokémon Journeys in English, has in fact concluded with Pokémon Journeys episode 136 on December 16th. So now is the perfect time to close the books on that beloved but polarizing series before we enter a new year of new beginnings and new adventures. Firstly, I just wanted to say that it is a very strange feeling when an anime series you've been invested in for several years draws to a close, but the joy of a show like Pokémon is that even when one series ends, its successor is just around the bend waiting to bring smiles to faces worldwide all over again. In other words, it's nice when the end isn't actually the end. And we have been given a lot to look forward to since the curtains closed on Pokémon Journeys proper, but before we look forward, I want to look backward to drop my final thoughts on a series that personally made quite a big impact on my life over the past 3 years. So today's plan is to simply 1. Review Pokémon Journeys from what may perhaps be somewhat of a unique perspective. And as always, it's going to be a good time, so kindly subscribe to edge us closer to the big 100, and let's bust out the juicy nuggets. Right after a special offer from the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. Because if you ask me, the best way to start 2023 is by building big skills to blast off in your student life, work life, and personal life. And Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of quality classes for creatives that will keep you leveling up all year long. Personally, I've been on Skillshare for years now, building my creativity and productivity skills, and if you've been tuning into my videos for a while, you've probably seen some of the animated or static pixel art that I enjoy cramming into just about every video. Of course, Skillshare has tons of high quality art classes, but for anyone specifically interested in pixel art, I'd recommend Simon Sanchez's Introduction to Pixel Art, as he will take you through all the essentials, from color theory to animation to character and environment creation, that you will need to get going on your artistic journey. So check it out and have fun going from zero to hero in just a couple hours, not to mention that there are thousands of other awesome classes to enjoy on Skillshare, and the first 1,000 people to use the link in the description box will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare Premium, so be sure to click that link to claim the free trial that will set you up for success in 2023. Thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and with that said, onward to the meat and potatoes of today's chat. It's no secret that Pokémon Journeys did some things well and some things not so well, and while some of the not so well stuff occurred as a result of the disruption caused by the Corsola measles outbreak, a good portion of the not so well was built directly into the show's structure and directorial choices. We are going to kick off this discussion by working through the main drawbacks of the series, but before we get into the thick of it, I'm going to point out that one of the key attractions of Pokémon Journeys was the revolving door of classic locations and classic characters coming in for cameos. It was an endless stream of fan service, some of it good, some of it bad, some of it incredible, and some of it kind of tough to watch. But in this review, I'm going to altogether ignore the fan service element that the show has leaned on so heavily to instead zero in on the elements that truly make or break a series, that is, its narrative and main characters. I think this will paint a much better picture of what Pokémon Journeys is at its core, because a slew of classic characters could easily be brought in to drum up nostalgia in any series, really, and for the most part, this has been done better in the past anyways. So I'd like to focus on Pokémon Journeys itself and leave the classic character cameos as a discussion for another day. Well, with that said, not to be a negative Nancy, but let's begin with the aspects of the series that bogged it down in the eyes of many fans, then move towards the key shifts in direction that lifted the whole show up by series end. Yes, we are going to talk about the good stuff, but let's start with the more controversial / not so good stuff. Firstly, I just want to address the Ash plus Go dual protagonist setup that basically defined Pokémon Journeys, as this was the first time that a co-star was elevated to the same level as Ash, and the results were somewhat mixed. On the bright side, the contrasting energy that the 2 members of the Go-Mance brought to the table made for a lot of laughs, and Go's personality itself is quite likable, thanks to the fantastic voice acting of Daiki Yamashita. But it was not until precisely halfway through the series that Go actually had a storyline substantial enough to merit tearing away so much screen time from the man who many would have preferred to be at the front and center from start to finish in his final anime series. In short, although Go is funny and cool cool, and he did have a handful of powerful moments in the first half of the show, a lot of the time he did little more than eat up screen time as he whipped Pokeballs at Pokemon left and right in tribute to a mobile game that had already passed out of the zeitgeist of the 2010s by the time the show started airing. The Go quota, as I call it, became a functionally meaningless but necessary check-the-box component of every episode in order for the writers to be able to show him inching towards his basically impossible goal. And it felt cheap in the wake of Ash's bond before catch plot threads of past series, not to mention that it also undermined the significance of any individual catch that Go made. On one hand, we can appreciate how the catch-a-thon better reflects how players play Pokemon Go as well as the mainline video games, but on the other hand, the anime is not an interactive game. It is a prepackaged story that success is hinged on the strength of its narrative and the character arcs that fit into that narrative. Catching Bellsprouts willy-nilly doesn't exactly power up these elements, and a lot of this time certainly could have been dedicated to, for instance, fleshing out the backstories and characters of Ash's Pokemon Journeys team. Furthermore, the handling of Team Rocket over the first half of the series exacerbated the fixation on the shallow showboating of Pokemon, so let's talk about it. One of Team Rocket's defining characteristics is that even though they are shameless criminals, they really do care deeply about their Pokemon, and how each Pokemon anime series digs into this kinship tends to be one of the highlights of the show. However, over the first half of its run, Pokemon Journeys stripped the meat from the bone to leave us with a gacha machine mechanic that largely sacrificed the charming rocket bonds of the past in favor of a shallow monster of the week approach that was a big step down from what we got in Pokemon Sun and Moon. In a sense, Go's mindless catch-a-thon and the uninspired Team Rocket gacha spam were both merely symptoms of a general aimlessness that defined the first half of Pokemon Journeys. Indeed, on an individual episode-to-episode basis, Act 1 of Pokemon Journeys actually brought out some of the most wholesome, entertaining, and emotionally charged episodes that the show has ever seen. But at the macro level, it lacked the cohesive, overarching structure that tied past series together into a meaningful family anime experience, entertaining and stimulating to both kids and adults. Not to mention that it felt directionless and strangely paced, with the episodes of what few multi-episode arcs there were awkwardly spaced apart, with no sensible linkages in between. And particularly in the middle era of the show, it was honestly anyone's guess as to what the writers wanted to tell us, or how the plot was actually going to move forward. As it was, Go caught things, and then he caught more things. Team Rocket interrupted episodes and got their butts kicked, but did so with less heart and soul. Sidecar Chloe, who I haven't even mentioned yet, was just there, doing something. And Ash, the man himself, started his final series without a goal in mind, almost symbolic of how that first stretch of Pokemon Journeys would turn out. And although he eventually entered the World Coronation series, the loosey-goosey ranking system made his progress at any given time in the normal and great classes fairly difficult to grasp relative to the linear, structured badge quests of the past. Not to mention that he would level up hundreds of ranks off-screen with no explanation as to how it happened. Most of us were still having fun with Pokemon Journeys at that point, and I'd argue that the show actually established a pretty high average episode quality benchmark, but the bigger picture was somewhat of a chaotic state of affairs. Fortunately, the latter half of the series was significantly more structured than the first half. We still got plenty of hard-hitting, wholesome, and hilarious episodes, but the sense of direction that the show had lacked throughout 2020 and the first half of 2021 finally began to emerge in the spring of 2021. One key moment of transition came in episode 68 when the perpetual trendsetter Gary Oak introduced Go to Project Mew, and soon thereafter Go became a Project Mew challenger, setting his heart on becoming a full-fledged Project Mew chaser who could join the elite group in their exciting search for the mythical Bubble Cat. This marked a huge upgrade in the quality of Go's story, and accordingly, given that he comprises one half of the Go-mance, a big increase in the overall quality of Pokemon Journeys. As instead of the catch every Pokemon on the road to Mew fluff that had admired the first half of the series in an aimless catch-a-thon, Go now had a concrete goal to hunker down, complete his trial missions, and earn enough trial tokens to finish among the top 3 Project Mew challengers in order to secure his role as a Project Mew chaser. A much more convincing path towards Mew than simply catching everything in sight. And I have to say that aside from its somewhat underwhelming conclusion and awkwardly abandoned Regigigas plotline, Project Mew had to be one of the most interesting subplots the series has seen in years, as each trial mission pressed go to complete unique challenges while injecting the mystery and adventure of an Indiana Jones movie and Danica into the series. As for Ash, as the necessity to break into the master class to become one of the top 8 trainers in the world before the end of the WCS season became more pressing, his World Coronation series took on a sense of urgency and gravity, and the inconsequential numbers hiding nothing ranking system also began to take on more meaning as the road to the Master's 8 finally came into view. As Ash's storyline kicked into high gear, we saw him finally master Mega Evolution, conclude his rivalry with B, trounce an Elite Four member for the very first time, make a triumphant homecoming to Alola, conduct anti-Ace Masters 8 training with his fiercest rival, etc, etc. And of course it goes without saying that the 12-episode Masters 8 tournament was an absolute sizzler, even if obvious budget constraints kept a leash on the action in the lead up to the explosive Ash vs Leon final. It was also near the midpoint that Chloe became more relevant, as after taking an Eevee under her wing in episode 49, she began to play a more active role as a member of the trio, and her core storyline finally took off in episode 63 when she and Eevee began a sequence of encounters with various Eeveelutions and their trainers, as Eevee tried to figure out which Eeveelution it wanted to evolve into, and Chloe tried to figure out what she wanted to do with her life. Over the course of Pokemon Journeys, Chloe became more assertive and more interested in the world around her, and while I would have liked to see her go further in her personal journey, the entire idea behind her story was that of not having any idea where to go in life, and struggling to find a starting point as we all must. And the series ended as she arrived at that starting point, so while I personally would have liked to see more, I think that her arc was handled well enough as a secondary character. Regarding Team Rocket, the Pokemon anime's other main characters, they never got the kind of drastic, crummy to comeback to climax redemption as Ash, Go, and Chloe, but there was definitely a shift upwards in the quality of their appearances. For example, we had a classic James is the man who can really connect with Pokemon episode wherein he bonded with Morpeko. We had the humorous underground adventure of JN72 wherein Meowth and Chloe shared quite the moment. We had a somewhat rushed but hearty episode that showed us what Bush and Cassidy have been up to all these years, and in which the gacha machine was triumphantly destroyed, as if the writers were telling us, yes, we know that that thing was a dud. And of course, we had my personal favorite, episode 106's Team Rocket radio show, an episode packed with hilarious gags and heartfelt themes. It was Team Rocket at their absolute best in the final Rocket-centered episode of the series, and perhaps for forever if they don't head to Paldea in April 2023 to harass the new protagonists Liko and Roy. Team Rocket have always been the perfect bumbling adult antagonist to balance against the audacious youthful heroes of the Pokemon anime, so I personally hope that we see them make the jump and continue failing for years to come. When all is said and done, roughly midway through Pokemon Journeys, we saw a shift in quality and focus that elevated the narratives and characters of the show to a better place while maintaining the easygoing approachability that had always been the selling point of the series, aside from the fan service. While watching the climax of the series unfold week to week as it came out was frustrating due to an average of one broadcasting break and one recap clip show episode just about every month from July 2022 through November 2022 on account of the studio's resource constraints, the final stretch of the series can now be enjoyed without a painful wait between proper episodes, and while it isn't perfect, it is certainly worth a watch for Pokemon fans. Lastly, I wanted to mention again that what will always be the high point of Pokemon Journeys for me, aside from the climactic conclusion to Ash's World Championship run, and of course the classic character cameos that we chose to set aside for this discussion, is the sheer number of one-off episodes that were as wholesome as Grandma's stew. These episodes were the bread and butter of Pokemon Journeys that kept me interested even at times when the overarching direction simply wasn't there, or when the budget was thin and the action was flat. They were the episodes that built out the feel of the Pokemon universe, had a serious tale to tell, or were simply nourishing, heartwarming fun from start to finish. And a few of my personal favorites include the following: the heartfelt story of a girl and her Cleffa, Team Rocket's radio show, the dedicated Krissa and Ren episodes, Chloe's family camping trip to Mount Moon, and of course, the brilliant conclusion to Lily's missing father arc, which began way back in Pokemon Sun and Moon. As the final full-length anime series starring Ash Ketchum, personally, I'll likely remember Pokemon Journeys as a series of big moments, but also missed opportunities, as introducing these elements that made the latter half of the series sizzle with structure and purpose earlier in the show's run would have set it on a much better track in my opinion. But at the end of the day, it was also a series that played to its strengths and left us with some of the best Pokemon episodes ever crafted, even if the bigger picture was a little bit blurry at times. So this is the end of Pokemon Journeys. The final curtain call of Ash Ketchum is almost upon us, and a new chapter is about to begin that I can't wait to talk about. But how about you? What did you think of Pokemon Journeys? What were the high points and the low points? And which episodes were your favorites? I'm curious what you think, and as always, let's chat.